the young man that actually fired the shot, 6 years old.
A dagger sheath or a knife sheath about this long laying on his stomach. I also noticed that there was a large amount of blood all over his chest.
But that's not going to change what happened. My daughter knows how much I love her and the babies.
The tragic events surrounding the death of Nathan Wintrow in Troy, Ohio, began on the night of October 30th, 2013. 3 boys, Brendan Terrell, Patrick McGale, and Jason Sowers II, drove together to Wintrow's home with the shared, premeditated intention of breaking in. Evidence later showed all 3 participants were aware that weapons were involved in the plan to steal from Wintrow. The break-in tragically turned fatal when a shot was fired. Nathan Wintrow inside his own home, while his partner and son were also present. When the case reached the Miami County Common Pleas Court, Wintrow's loved ones filled the courtroom to deliver emotional statements, ensuring the judge understood the depth of the man they had lost.
He was the perfect man. He sacrificed so much for me when I got pregnant young with our son.
I was at work when I got the phone call from my other son, Clint, telling me that Nathan was shot in the head. No parent should ever have to live through what I am still trying to live through.
The court sought to hold each participant accountable for their role in the fatal night, handing down significant sentences over a series of hearings. Brendan Terrell, the driver, received 14 years in prison after pleading guilty.
You knew that each of your co-defendants was armed with a deadly weapon, yet you freely got into the car with them, and then you willingly went with them.
Jason Sowers II, the individual who fired the weapon, was sentenced to 18 years to life. Finally, Patrick McGale, who was convicted of aggravated murder after going to trial, received the maximum sentence of 30 years to life in prison. In May 2014, Inglewood police were called to a home on Savina Avenue after a dispute between roommates took a serious turn. Living in the house were 31-year-old John Cochran and 52-year-old Mark Gershon, along with another roommate. According to investigators, an argument escalated, and Gershon retreated to his bedroom and tried to block the door. Police say Cochran forced his way inside, leading to a violent confrontation. A third roommate tried to help but ended up injured in the struggle. When officers arrived, they found Gershon fatally wounded, marking Inglewood's first homicide in 7 years. Cochran was arrested at the scene and later indicted on multiple charges, including murder and felonious assault. He entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, but during trial, experts testified that he did not meet the legal standard for that defense. Prosecutors presented physical evidence, including the small sword they said Cochran used.
Most of these wounds here average between 9 to 11 inches in depth. We have a couple that actually appear to go through the body. These cuts in the shirt actually do correspond very well with numerous wounds to the left hip.
They also presented testimony from responding officers.
I noticed there was like a dagger sheath or a knife sheath about this long laying on his stomach. I also noticed that there was a large amount of blood all over his chest. The gentleman got out of the truck and I walked over and I asked her, "Are you John Cochran?" And he stated and affirmed that yes, he was. I told him he was under arrest.
After reviewing the case, the jury rejected the insanity claim and found Cochran guilty. In early 2016, a judge sentenced him to 15 years to life in prison, bringing legal closure to a case that had deeply affected the Inglewood community. In October 2011, a heated argument on a Springfield street ended in tragedy when 2 men, 28-year-old Dovon Williams and 27-year-old Arbery Smith, were shot and killed. Police quickly identified a suspect, Timothy Jones Jr., but by the time warrants were issued, he had already disappeared. For weeks, investigators searched across state lines. Finally, in early January, U.S. Marshals found him hiding in Decatur, Alabama. He was brought back to Clark County, where a judge set his bond at $1 million and scheduled further hearings so he could secure legal representation. The victim's family found no remorse on his face.
There's no remorse. He's a coward, just like I said, and even more so now. I didn't want him to have the death penalty, but there's no remorse. I don't care what they do to him. Whatever he got coming, I hope they throw the book to the fullest.
By the following summer, the case moved to trial. Prosecutors presented witnesses and a cell phone video that captured the argument leading up to the arguing it showed Jones acting with intent. Jones chose to represent himself, challenging the evidence, but the jury was not persuaded. After a short deliberation, they found him guilty on 2 counts of murder and an additional weapons charge. A week later, the judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms, ensuring he would never be released. For the victims' families, the verdict brought a measure of closure, marking the end of a long, painful search for justice. In 2012, a neighborhood disagreement in Titusville, Florida, slowly grew into a tense and uncomfortable situation. William Woodward and several of his neighbors, Gary Hembry, Roger Pettier, and Bruce Blake, had once been on friendly terms, but a dispute over a missing package led to accusations, arguments, and months of rising hostility. Both sides called the police multiple times, and the tension in the neighborhood became impossible to ignore. Woodward later said he felt targeted and feared the situation was getting out of control, but court records show that requests for protective orders were denied. On Labor Day weekend that year, the conflict reached a breaking point. Late at night, Woodward left his home and approached the group of neighbors across the street. What happened next ended with Hembry and Pettier fatally wounded and Blake seriously injured. Woodward was arrested and charged, and in the years that followed, the case moved slowly toward trial. During the proceedings, prosecutors described the shooting as a planned attack, while Woodward's defense insisted he believed he was protecting his family. In early 2018, a jury rejected the self-defense claim and found him guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. During sentencing, family members of the victims spoke about their grief, describing how their lives had been changed forever since the 2012 shooting.
No one has taught me more about the value of family, respect for others, and kindness.
I have never seen any remorse from the person responsible for taking my son's life. He has never shown any accountability for his actions, for the pain, the heartache, and the destruction he has done to my family. I hope he never sees freedom again.
Laying on the ground looking at someone pump bullets at me is a constant flashback, but will never happen again. You made a permanent decision on a temporary emotion. You spent over 5 years trying to change that. I've handled what happened to me. Now you got to handle what happened to you.
Supporters of Woodward, including his own father, also addressed the court.
My son does not deserve to be in prison. He does not deserve it. And I'm going to ask you to please consider everything you've heard today.
He asked the judge to show leniency and described him as someone who made a terrible decision but was not beyond redemption. The judge, however, sentenced William Woodward to life in prison, bringing legal closure to a long, painful conflict that forever changed the lives of everyone involved. In October 2010, 21-year-old Dorian Lucas was speeding away from police when his car struck a woman named Natasha Layette. She survived the crash but passed away several weeks later from complications related to her injuries. While investigators were still handling that case, another incident unfolded in April 2011. This time, Lucas was involved in a dispute inside a West Grandview apartment where his friend was fatally shot during what prosecutors later described as a drug-related conflict. Both events placed Lucas at the center of 2 serious investigations within months of each other. By 2012, Lucas chose to plead guilty to multiple charges tied to these incidents. During sentencing, the courtroom was filled with emotional testimony from both families.
She missed her oldest daughter getting married this past Friday. And this coming Friday, my daughter would have celebrated her 40th birthday.
Words can't explain what the pain you would cause my family, and you took my child from me. And I can never get him back.
Loved ones of the victims spoke about the lives and milestones lost, while Lucas himself read a letter that many in the room felt showed little remorse.
I ain't come here today to ask for forgiveness, because if you can't forgive me, the one that it matters to will forgive me. Because of him and his reasons, I'm still alive. Do I agree on how life has changed for all of us? No. But then again, it's always better than them than me, any day.
The judge ultimately sentenced him to 25 years in prison, noting his behavior and the impact of his actions on the community. Lucas will not be eligible for parole until 2037, when he will be in his mid-40s. In the summer of 2018, Orlando mother Victoria Toth called 911 after her son, Jace Martin, became unresponsive. When investigators arrived, they noticed several concerning signs and launched a full inquiry into how the boy had been living. As detectives pieced together the timeline, they learned Toth had been sharing a home with her boyfriend, Jonathan Pursglove. Both adults were soon arrested and charged with aggravated manslaughter, with authorities alleging that Jace's medical needs had been ignored in the days leading up to his death. The tragedy prompted a lengthy, heavily scrutinized investigation.
What we do oppose, effectively booting her out of her residence, creating that kind of a problem.
As the case moved through the courts, Toth was granted unusual living arrangements. She was allowed to stay with Pursglove's sister, who was listed as a witness expected to testify against her. Judges monitored the situation closely, eventually ordering her to stop visiting Pursglove in jail, but allowing her to remain in the home as long as it did not interfere with the case. Her parents, who lived nearby, had urged her to return home, even sharing emotional stories about feeling their grandson's presence through small signs around the house.
I hope he's not following me right now. I've talked to him a lot and I've begged him, don't follow me right now until I go home.
He has visited us. We know that he's visited us. We've seen the cardinals in the backyard. He's played with the light switches here. And I think it was last weekend, the doorbell rang.
Oh my God.
I know how he loved to mess with buttons, anything buttons. That was him that rang the doorbell.
In early 2021, after years of legal back and forth, Victoria Toth accepted a plea deal. Instead of going to trial on the original charges, she pleaded guilty to aggravated child neglect, a lesser offense, and faced a possible sentence of up to 15 years. In 2014, Jessica Erowsquin left work at a gentleman's club with her co-worker, Marilee Walker, who had agreed to give her a ride home. Marilee later told investigators that Jessica was tired and unsteady, and during the drive through Cocoa Beach, she stepped out of the vehicle while searching for a friend's house. Believing Jessica had arrived where she wanted to go, Marilee said she continued on. The next morning, a resident on Rose Drive found Jessica in the roadway, prompting detectives to launch an investigation. A piece of paper with Marilee's name found beneath Jessica kept her connected to the case, but without stronger evidence, the investigation slowed and eventually turned cold. Nearly 4 years passed before a breakthrough arrived after the family hired a private investigator.
I would have to say that we're extremely thankful to everybody that has put a hand in this, both friends, family. I'm sure some folks would say, why did it take so long? But we don't know if this person felt intimidated, threatened, or any of the above. So to us, we're just very thankful that the person has come forward.
Someone who knew Marilee came forward with new information that contradicted her original story, giving detectives the missing piece they had waited for. With this new statement and earlier evidence, authorities arrested Marilee Walker in 2018 on charges related to Jessica's death and for leaving the scene.
We don't stop, and it's one of those cases that when it gets assigned to a detective, we still follow through.
The case concluded in 2019 when a judge sentenced Marilee to 2 years of house arrest, followed by 15 years of probation. In 1995, the Fort Wayne community was shaken by the tragic death of Shauna Carter in her own home. The case remained unsolved for 3 years, leaving investigators and the victim's family without answers, while Jimmy Bedoya continued his life. The breakthrough came years later when advancements in DNA technology identified Bedoya as the suspect. He was arrested, convicted, and in 1999 was automatically sentenced to a mandatory life sentence without parole, the standard punishment for juveniles convicted of murder at that time. He spent decades incarcerated until the U.S. Supreme Court later ruled that such automatic sentences for minors were unconstitutional, meaning Bedoya was legally entitled to a new, individualized sentencing hearing. Decades after his conviction, Bedoya's case returned to court to determine his future. During the resentencing hearing, Bedoya publicly addressed the court and Shauna's family for the first time, offering an emotional apology for the crime he committed when he was young.
Sir, by the grace of God, I have been afforded this opportunity to accept responsibility in my involvement in this awful act, and offer my sincerest apologies to the Card family. With your permission, Your Honor, please allow me to address the Card family. Mr. and Mrs. Card, I'm truly, deeply sorry for ending Shauna's life. May God bless her soul. There hasn't been a day that has gone by that I'm not reminded of the wrong, the harm and pain that I've caused you.
His family testified that he was a changed man and pleaded for his release, promising their support. After carefully reviewing the gravity of the crime against Shauna and the arguments for rehabilitation, the judge issued the final decision in December 2020, upholding the life sentence and ensuring Bedoya would remain incarcerated. The tragic death of 23-year-old Brandon Anglin began on January 5, 2018, when he was fatally shot outside a South Apopka home. Deputies responded quickly, but Brandon could not be saved, leaving behind a family who felt an immediate, devastating loss. Brandon's sister grew concerned when he didn't answer his phone, a rare occurrence, and her fears were confirmed upon arriving near the scene.
It's hard for everyone in the family to lose someone that we love very much. I normally never have to call my brother's phone more than 3 times, so that's how I knew something was wrong, and I had that feeling that something wasn't right.
In the days that followed, she became a determined advocate, staying in constant contact with detectives and ensuring the case remained a priority.
It just felt like it was my job to do and find out these things that needed to be found out.
This persistence, coupled with a crucial witness stepping forward, pointed investigators toward the suspect. According to the arrest affidavit, Brandon and 26-year-old Willie James Dennison III argued over money, and detectives believe this dispute tragically escalated, resulting in Dennison during the fatal shot. Just 12 days after the incident, Willie James Dennison III was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. While the arrest brought some relief to Brandon's family, his sister vowed not to rest until they achieved a full conviction.
That's not right. You can't do something to someone and expect to walk around in this world free.
The case has since moved through the judicial system. Dennison III formally entered a plea of not guilty and remains in the Orange County Jail, currently without bond. As of late 2025, the case is in the pretrial phase, with both sides preparing for a trial to determine Dennison's guilt. In the summer of 2014, the Pilkington family in Bellefontaine, Ohio, experienced a devastating loss when Niall died unexpectedly. His passing was considered unexplained, and the family tried to move forward. In April 2015, another tragedy followed when Gavin also died without a clear medical explanation. Authorities noted the unusual pattern, but did not yet have enough information to suspect a crime. Then, in August 2015, the family lost a third boy, Noah, who was only a old. 3 deaths in just over a year raised immediate concern, prompting investigators to take a closer look at what was happening inside the home. After Noah's death, detectives interviewed the boy's mother, 24-year-old Brittany Pilkington. During a recorded conversation, she described actions that linked her to the deaths. Her defense team later argued that the interview should not be permitted in court, raising concerns about her understanding of her rights and her emotional state at the time. A judge reviewed the footage and ruled that she had been properly advised and that there was no evidence of intimidation or improper pressure from investigators. With the recording allowed, the case moved forward. In 2019, after years of legal proceedings, Pilkington accepted a plea agreement. She admitted responsibility for all 3 deaths, 2 counts of murder and 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, and received a sentence of 37 years to life in prison, bringing legal resolution to a case that had deeply shaken the community. In early 2010, investigators in New Carlisle, Ohio, began looking into claims that 58-year-old Deborah Houston was trying to hire someone to harm her son-in-law, David Kiter. An undercover informant posing as a hitman recorded conversations over several months, and prosecutors said those recordings showed Houston offering payment and discussing her plans. Officers eventually staged a fake photo of Kiter's believing it would help them confirm her intentions. Houston was arrested soon after and indicted on several serious charges, including conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, and aggravated arson. She pleaded not guilty, and her attorney argued that Houston had been manipulated and pressured throughout the undercover operation. When the case went to trial, both sides presented extensive evidence. Prosecutors relied heavily on nearly 70 hours of audio and video they said demonstrated Houston's Houston's willingness to move forward with the plot. The defense countered that Houston had been pushed into the conversations and that the informant played an outsized role in steering the entire plan. Because the judge had previously expressed concerns about parts of the evidence, the defense waived a jury and chose to have the judge decide the verdict.
During that pretrial motion, the judge gave an indication of his personal view on some of that evidence. And when he did that, the defense attorney stood up and waived a jury. We feel that had this case been tried to a jury, then Ms. Houston certainly would have been convicted.
After reviewing the recordings and testimony, the judge ruled that the entrapment concerns were sufficient to create reasonable doubt regarding the most serious charges.
It took the judge an enormous amount of time to come to the conclusions he did. We are very grateful to Judge O'Neill for the amount of time he spent in this case. This case was so complicated over a period of months. 70 hours of tape recordings and video recordings. It would not be fair to try to summarize it just in a synopsis.
Houston was acquitted of the alleged murder-for-hire plot, but was found guilty of conspiracy to commit arson for her involvement in a plan to damage an attorney's office. The tragic events began on Sunday morning, June 29, 2013, in Springfield, Ohio, when 33-year-old Alana Spink was found unresponsive on West Jefferson Street with severe injuries. Authorities rushed her to a local hospital, from which she was immediately flown to a specialized facility, but doctors were unable to save her. She died the following day. Her death was immediately treated as a homicide, with the police chief making a public commitment that Alana, as the victim of a violent crime, deserved full justice.
Ms. Spink is first and foremost a victim of a violent crime. Her past, her lifestyle is of no consequence. She's a victim of a violent crime. Quite frankly, this is tragic on very many levels. Ms. Spink lost her life. She left behind grandfather and mother, her family. And also people need to just be aware of what they may see in their comings and goings, no matter what time of the day or night.
As detectives followed leads, they executed a search warrant on a Mound Street home, gathering evidence that led them to 32-year-old Ryan Baker. Investigators determined that Baker had been responsible for inflicting the fatal injuries with his car. Baker, who had a prior criminal history, was arrested and formally charged with murder. When he appeared in the crowded Clark County courtroom in July 2013, he entered a plea of not guilty and was held on a $100,000 bond. However, the case was resolved before trial. On March 17, 2014, Baker took responsibility for the crime, formally pleading guilty to aggravated murder. He was immediately sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. In early April 2024, a quiet afternoon inside a Newaygo County home turned into a tragedy no one could take back. Carl Robart, a grandfather living in the house, kept several dangerous items in his bedroom, some already prepared for use and left in plain sight. 3 young relatives, including his grandson Braxton Dykstra, were visiting. At some point, the boys and girl wandered into the bedroom. A boy picked up one of the unsecured items on the floor, not understanding the danger. In a single moment, the item discharged. Braxton, who was nearby, was struck and collapsed. His sister saw everything and ran to find help. Emergency crews responded quickly, but Braxton could not be saved. His passing devastated his parents, grandparents, siblings, extended family, and the first responders who tried to save him. During the investigation, deputies found 4 unsecured firearms in the bedroom, including 2 that were loaded. Ammunition was scattered throughout the room. Under Michigan's new safe storage law, adults must secure weapons when boys or girls are present. Prosecutors later said the tragedy happened because those precautions were ignored. Carl and his wife, Teresa, were both charged. Carl chose to plead, acknowledging privately and publicly that if he had taken basic safety measures, his grandson would still be alive. During sentencing, Braxton's father spoke through heartbreak. He said the loss destroyed not only their home, but also the lives of grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and especially Braxton's sister, who now carries memories no young girl should carry.
I know this wasn't done maliciously, but neither is an incident between a drunk driver and an innocent life. It's the action of you, Carl Robart, and your wife that allowed this to happen. Owning firearms to Owning firearms comes with a great responsibility. Common sense tells you if you have guns in your room, don't let children in there. Seeming you have 3 children that live in that home, you would think you would have some sort of common sense, but I guess it's not so common anymore, is it? 4 firearms that were found in your room and your wife's bedroom should have never been in the reach of children, let alone 2 loaded guns. When police asked where you kept the ammo, you said all over. Not only did the irresponsibility and negligence of every adult that lives in that home destroy my life, it destroyed your daughter's too. It destroyed our family, not just ours, the other grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. It destroyed a little 8-year-old girl's life, Braxton's big sister. She has to live every day knowing what happened when the gun went off. She will always remember that day, probably thinking to herself, what if she was faster to get up and get help? The innocence in her eyes is gone. She will never be the same after this horrible tragedy we all are living through. Grandparents are supposed to keep their grandbabies safe. No one in that household did that day. Instead, 3 little innocent children were put in danger the moment you all allowed them to step foot in that room. A little boy who had so much love for everyone and everything is now gone. The people we thought we could trust with their kids failed. I will never get to hug my son again. I'll never get to hear his precious voice or his silly laugh. I will never get those warm welcome home hugs when I get home from work ever again. It's obvious everything I say or do will never bring my baby boy back. Nothing ever will. My little boy lost about 80 years of his life due to negligence and irresponsibility of a gun owner. No matter how much time you get, it'll never be enough. That's it, Your Honor.
Carl's attorney highlighted his serious medical issues, but admitted Carl understood the seriousness of his actions.
Pre-sentence investigation, evaluation, and plan. It'd be the 3rd page of the packet. It says in the 5th paragraph, it says that the father or the defendant takes no responsibility for this instant offense. And Your Honor, I disagree with that statement. He came in, he pled. He's some of the things he says may try to deflect a little bit of the responsibility, but the long and short of it is that he came in, he pled. He's going to testify because he's adamant that his wife, the child's grandmother, had nothing to do with this. And he's going to tell that to the jury in her case. He's responsible for this. He said he's responsible for this. His grandchild will still be alive if he'd have paid more attention. He has to live with this, not only with the fact of the responsibility, but also with the fact of the loss of this child. He's not going to be able to see any of that stuff, enjoy any of that anymore either. And he knows it's very difficult for him to wake up and face this. And, you heard the child's father. My client feels the same thing. Other than the fact that, the responsibility of it. This law was just enacted a couple of weeks before this charge, and there's a reason for it, and this is it. This is the reason for it. And, I've known Carl. His parents were friends of mine. I've known Carl since he was a little kid. And, he's got a couple of minor scrapes with the law when he was younger, but nothing, for the last 24 years. Why? I think he might have an impaired driving. Other than that, nothing. He was minding his own business, doing what he had to do, raise his family, and it hasn't been easy for him. He's in severe physical health problems, but he's here today, Your Honor. He's here to take the responsibility. He's here to give you what the court deems necessary, but, you know, he wants everybody to know that he is extremely sorry for this whole situation, and he is not shirking his responsibility in this at all. He lost his grandchild, his wife, you know, they haven't been able to visit the other grandchildren, and it's just, it's a nightmare. It is a nightmare that this whole family, not just Carl and his wife, but the parents, those grandparents, it's just a nightmare what has happened. And, you know, there's a reason for it. That's why they enacted the law. So, you know, I guess whatever punishment you give him is just, that's what he said, just, you know, give it to me. You know, that's, his life, as well as the grandchild's, is pretty much over. You know, with his health problems, I'm not sure he's going to get out of prison, but he is not taking this lightly. There isn't a day goes by where she had that moment back. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Robart, have you had the opportunity to read the report and discuss it with Mr. Greer?
I have.
Do you have any additions, corrections, or challenges other than the ones that were raised by Mr. Greer?
No.
Is there anything that you want the court to consider? Anything that you want to say for yourself?
Well, Your Honor, there's a lot of things I could say. But it's not going to change what happened. My daughter knows how much I love her and I'm bitter. And if I survive this, I'm going to do everything I can in my life to continue to support her and her children. That's all I can say.
Carl spoke briefly, saying nothing he could say would undo what happened and that he would carry the responsibility forever. The judge made it clear that while there was no intent, the situation was still completely preventable. Family members had warned Carl months earlier to secure his weapons, yet he didn't. The judge explained that boys and girls should never have been able to access anything dangerous in the first place.
All right. The court recognizes that the advisory guidelines would suggest a sentence between 19 months 38 months on the minimum. The maximum is set by statute at 15 years. The courts can exercise my discretion and sentence consent with the advisory guidelines consistent with the plea agreement in this case. It would be the sentence of the court that this defendant serve 38 months on the minimum to a maximum of 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. I'll give him credit for the 30 days that he's served so far. And Mr. Robart, there are some common themes that people have raised here today that certainly share my thoughts in this case. But this tragedy was 100% avoidable. All you had to do was listen to the people in your life that were telling you to put these loaded away. And you didn't. The safe storage law received a tremendous amount of attention in Michigan, but we don't need a law to say that it's not safe to have guns loaded or unloaded where they're readily available to children. The pre-sentence investigation report reflects that family members warned you several months to put them away, and you did not, nor did any other adult that was in the house. Your failure to take the most simple safety precautions changed the lives of so many people. The obvious ones are the parents' family, friends, relatives, but we can't overlook what the young man that actually fired the shot, 6 years old, saw what happened. He has to live with that every single day. I can't imagine him going to school. At some point, people are going to know he's the kid that shot somebody, and he's probably going to get teased about it. And then you've got the girl that was there that saw it. She too, those things are things that no kid should see. They can't unsee those things. Then I think about your wife that was trying to give CPR to the victim, but there's no delicate way to say it. The damages were so bad, she couldn't find his mouth to breathe into. This case, I know, was not easy for law enforcement. I know that several people on the scene, they're haunted by the sight that they saw. It's something that they can't get over. It's something that they can't unsee. And it's something that they shouldn't have to carry either. Your attorney wants this court to believe that you take responsibility for this, but I don't see that. From your statement that you made in the pre-sentence report, that weapon was not loaded when I put it behind the door. The only reason it was loaded was because of the threats against my family. Now, I own I can't see how a 6-year-old boy with no experience with guns could, number one, find ammunition that was supposedly hidden. Number two, try and figure out how to load a shell into this Remington 870 shotgun, especially since you said that the safety was on. Would have to take the safety off, would have to move the slide forward, would have to feed a shell into the bottom, push it forward till it clicks, and then activate the slide. All those things don't seem possible to me, and they fly in the face of logic. It leads the court to the only conclusion that you left this loaded, you knew it was loaded, and all this stuff about it couldn't have been loaded, it had to be unloaded, that's all you trying to minimize or trying to get yourself out of this situation or have you live with yourself. That was loaded, and you knew it was. So I don't see that you take any responsibility for what happened here. And it's for those reasons that the court has imposed the maximum sentence that I can under these advisory guidelines. The court would direct that your financial assessments would be collected through the inmate account and parole process. You do have the right to make application for leave to appeal your conviction sentence. If you cannot afford an attorney, the court appoint an attorney to represent you on the appeal. The request for a lawyer must be filed with the court within 42 days. You need to go with Deputy Hermans.
Because of the negligence, the judge imposed the maximum sentence allowed under the plea agreement, 38 months to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections, with credit for time already served. On the night of May 9th, 2025, a small group of friends gathered in a home in Tallmadge Township, Michigan. Among them were 20-year-old Weston Muhlenberg and 19-year-old Connor Lauderman. The evening started normally, with friends talking and relaxing together. Later that night, Weston, who had been drinking, went upstairs with 2 other friends. Inside the room, he picked up a device that should never have been handled carelessly. Despite warnings, he pointed it toward the floor and triggered it repeatedly. Were fired. Weston believed the floor would contain the force, but one of the projectiles passed through and struck the room below the very moment Connor stepped inside. The impact left him critically injured, and despite emergency efforts, he could not be saved. Deputies from the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office launched an immediate investigation. Physical markings, witness statements, and structural damage made the sequence of events clear. When approached by investigators, Weston did not hide anything. He admitted his actions and cooperated fully, acknowledging how irresponsible and dangerous his behavior had been. In September 2025, rather than blaming anyone else or contesting the evidence, Weston stood in court and pleaded guilty to the charge of discharging a firearm inside a building causing death. He told his attorney he wanted to accept responsibility and did not want to prolong the pain of the Lauderman family. During the sentencing hearing, Connor's father described a young man who was the youngest of 5 siblings, everyone's favorite, and a person whose kindness kindness lifted every room. He spoke about dreams that would never be fulfilled, Connor's engineering career, his plans for marriage, and the future he was building with his girlfriend. The family shared how life had changed permanently, how holidays and daily routines now felt incomplete. Connor's girlfriend also addressed the court.
I was the girlfriend of Connor Waterman. Connor and I had been dating for almost 3 years when he was killed. We were planning on getting married maybe this fall, and he even went to the ring store the day before he was shot. Connor was my best friend, favorite person, and the boy I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Connor was one of the only people I could always count on. He knew how to make my bad days better, and it's hard to continue to walk this life without him. Every day, Connor would remind me of all the reasons he loved me. It's been 5 months since his death, and not a day goes by where I don't miss him and the life we had planned. Sometimes it still seems like he is coming back. Everything that Connor did was with the intention to make me happy. He always put my needs before his own. Even though our relationship was not perfect, we really did have a love for each other. Connor worked hard at everything he did, and I knew that one day he was going to be a great husband and father, because at family things, all the little cousins would attach themselves to Connor the entire time. I'll never forget the love that me and Connor had. It will always be a part of me. I miss the feeling of being loved just as much. He loved me with his whole heart. This was evident by the love letters he wrote me. The love in his actions towards me. Yes, there were times where we argued, but at the end of the day, we both realized our weaknesses and prayed that God would continue to bless our relationship. A month before Connor was killed, me and him were driving down the street where this all happened. He looked at me and said, "Ray, I hope that I die first, because I would not be able to live without you." I looked at him, laughed, and said, "Oh, Connor, don't worry about that. We have at least 50 years. There's a lot that we have to do first." A month later, I received the call that he had been shot. Even though I keep showing up to things and laughing and trying to live, every day now is marked by his absence. It is only through God's strength that I can live each day, but at times I hate that this is my reality. Losing Connor has changed me. I'm not the same girl I was when I was with him, and a part of me will not go back to who I was before Connor. I am healing, but that does not mean I am forgetting him. I will carry him with me as I walk the path God has placed in front of me. When I lost Connor, I thought all it was losing him. But it's not. It's also all the secondary losses that I have to endure. All the events and places I have to go for the first time without him. I will never become his wife. I will never travel with him. I will never see him become a father. I will never hear his laugh or voice again. I'll never have one last conversation or one last hug. His death is permanent from this earth, and every day I'm faced with the secondary losses. I'm scared I'll forget his face, the way he laughed, he told stories. And I'm scared I will forget the way or his voice, and my memories of him will begin to fade. For me, the reality of grief is feeling so alone. Even though I have a big support system, there's no one I'd rather call than Connor, as I crash out over his death. It's amazing how alone you can feel when everyone's life carries on, and they get to experience the events me and Connor looked forward to. Before Connor died, Sundays were my favorite day of the week, because we got to spend the whole day and attend church. Now, Sundays are the hardest day of the week, and I dread them. I also dread holidays, and I never want to experience another one without him. Since his death, I have been told that I have depression and anxiety. As I journey through the trauma and grief, I often have nervous breakdowns when things get too overwhelming, and often struggle with sleep and brain fog, making simple tasks sometimes hard. There is a level of trauma that I have experienced because I was halfway across the world when it happened. There is a sense of guilt for missing the last week of his life and his last breath on earth. Being so far away, it wasn't until after he had passed that I was able to be back by his side. I'm scared to go on trips, first because I don't want anyone to die while I am away, but also coming back to Connor being gone makes me relive May 10. When anyone mentions or alcohol, my entire body tenses up, and all I can think about is Connor. I'm scared that at any moment, the next closest person to me is going to die. Connor's death has impacted many of my relationships, some good and some negative. One of those relationships that has been impacted is with my family. Not only do they miss him, but they were looking forward to adding a brother and a son to the family. My parents and my siblings have also had to watch their daughter and sister grieve and live with the burden of losing Connor. One of the better impacts is my relationship with Connor's family, the Laudermans. Connor brought them into my life, and I will forever be grateful to him for that. These last couple months, I have grown closer with them. However, it is also bittersweet as I will never officially be a part of their family. There are many things that we are going to have to navigate in the future and questions that I don't have the answer to regarding our relationship. They are my second family, and I do not want to lose the relationship I have with them. If I'm honest, there is fear and worry about what the future holds for that. In the beginning, I found myself reaching for my phone to send a text of something interesting that happened or to give him a phone call. The one person I always wanted to share my day and experience with was no longer on the other end of the phone. I keep thinking how different things would be if Connor was still here and he could experience how much I love and need him during the time I need him most. As for you, Weston, you have seen me being strong and gracious towards you, but with full honesty, I have wrapped my brain around that it was your actions that took Connor's life. Yes, this wasn't God's plan, but we cannot just shrug our shoulders and say this had to happen. It was God's plan. Because yes, even though that is true, God is not the author of sin and he hates sin. What happened on May 9 was a result of sin. James 1 verse 13 says, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempt he any man." God allowed the devil to tempt you, Weston, that night, but you still actively chose to consume a lot of alcohol. You chose to pick up that gun, and you chose to fire it 7 times into the floor. I know that one day I will be able to look you in the eyes and say, I forgive you. As for now, I continue to work through the process of forgiveness each day. I would be lying if I continued to put on this mask of being strong, but it's really hard to be vulnerable with the person who took Connor from me. To others that don't see my pain, my tears, or me at my lowest, it's because I guard myself to avoid more pain. I trust that whatever happens in the next couple minutes, days, weeks, and months to come, God is guiding each of us, and he will never leave my side, Weston's side, and everyone else's. Thank you, Judge, for allowing me to share.
Thank you. Mr. Medema, anything further?
She shared how they had been planning their future together, how he made ordinary days joyful, and how every day since his passing felt heavier. She remembered the ring he had chosen shortly before he died, and the life they both believed they would build.
One of those cases as a defense attorney I think is probably the hardest ones that you can have. I desperately wish that I would have met Weston Muhlenberger under different circumstances than I met him. He is somebody who I would be proud to call my own son. He is somebody who I would want my own son to emulate and to be friends with. I am also incredibly sad that I never got the opportunity to meet Connor Lauderman in this case. I have reviewed every letter that's been submitted on Connor's behalf, and he is clearly was a son that any parent would be proud to have, and likewise somebody who I wish my own kids would have emulated, not only been friends with, but would have emulated. And I cannot imagine the grief that the Lauderman family is going through. Learning about Connor through the victim impact letters, I had not learned anything new. And the reason I had not learned anything new was because throughout this entire process, Weston had talked nothing about Connor and nothing about Connor's parents. As a defense attorney, when you sit down and you sit down with your client, and you sit down with the family members, one of the first things that any client asks is, what's going to happen to me? What am I looking at? And what I can tell you through this entire process, Weston had never once brought that question to my attention. Weston's first question to me is, I don't know if I deserve to have an attorney. I did this. I need to pay for what I did. And I need to take responsibility for it. And it struck me because Weston throughout this entire time was about, what do I do to make things right? Do I reach out? I don't want to reach out to anybody if me reaching out is going to cause pain. And I think from the get-go, what I can tell you about this young man was that this was a terribly tragic, poor, reckless decision he made, and will be the first one to tell you that, and he said that from the get-go. Weston admitted that he was the one who did it when police first contacted him. He never tried to deflect that there was anybody else who could have done this. He said it was him, and he always had asked, what's going to happen to Connor? What's going to happen to Connor? So I know that the individual you have here before you, it makes sense that Weston and Connor were friends, because they were probably two of the best of youth that you could think of. And the tragedy is one is gone, and one is before you, it's about to go to prison. With regards, one of the letters that struck, and Weston had asked me to brought up, is that I think there was a letter that maybe that the Laudermans had felt abandoned at some point by the church, because there was a rallying around Weston and maybe a not giving the proper care to the Lauderman family. And I tell you that was something that Weston, when he read that letter, crushed him. And it was ironic, because during various conversations that we would have, and we would talk about the church and the elders, and his, again, number one concern is are the Laudermans okay? Is someone looking out for the Lauderman family? So I can assure you that this is a young man who, he's not somebody who society needs to be protected from. He's not somebody who is going to ever reoffend. He is not somebody that anybody needs to be protected from. He is a good, godly, loving, caring young man who is racked with guilt because of what he did to his friend Connor. And he has never called it an accident. He understands the difference between accident and doing something intentionally that has an unintentional consequence. And I have clients all the time say it was an accident. I've never heard him use the word accident. He's never used that word. So I don't know what to tell you is the appropriate sentence. What I can tell you is, obviously going in today, we were under the impression that the guideline range was 42 to 70. I understand the court's rulings on that. And so I guess, turns to like the federal system, which is, what is a sentence that is sufficient but not greater than necessary to accomplish those goals of what sentencing is. And I'd ask that you arrive at a sentence that is sufficient but just not greater than necessary. Again, Connor Lauderman was a wonderful kid, a wonderful young man, and I wish I would have had a chance to meet him. I'm happy I had the chance to meet Weston. I'm a better person for it. And I know I would have been a better person if I would have had a chance to meet Connor. Thank you, Your Honor.
You are Weston Muhlenberg?
I am.
Have you had an adequate opportunity to read and review the pre-sentence report?
Yes.
Any additions or corrections that you wish to make?
No.
Anything that you would like to say before sentence is imposed?
Yes, please.
You may proceed.
Mr. and Mrs. Lauderman family, Ray, Brummel family, I want to use this opportunity to apologize in person to those whom I have hurt, and realize that I can never apologize to everyone who was touched through Connor's death. I have sinned against you all. I have also sinned against Connor, someone who has only been good to me, someone who I benefited from, someone who only gave in life, someone who I appreciated, enjoyed, and respected. That someone who gave so much to me, I returned only evil to in his last day. It pains me to know how good of a man I took away from you all. The worst part is how permanent the consequences of my stupid choices are. Choices I can never explain or take back. Those choices that night will haunt me for the rest of my life, as I know they will for so many others. I can say I'm sorry and apologize as many times as I want, but without actions, my words are useless. Sorry has to mean something. It has to mean something to everyone here and everyone who I've hurt. that something might be different for each person, and that something might change as no hurt is discovered. I believe today that something is to humbly accept the punishment from the state for the numerous laws I've broken. Sorry also has to mean something to myself. I promise you my life will change with the memory of Connor. I promise you I will lead a sober life physically and an ever-increasingly sober life spiritually. I hope my choices these past 5 months and my future choices will show that I am truly sorry and that I understand the seriousness of my actions. I hope that I have shown and continue to show through this all that I accept the responsibility of my actions and do not shy away from them. I hope I can be a testament of how Connor lived, selflessly caring for others and serving our Lord. With God's gracious help, I dedicate myself to a life of true repentance. Through this all, I understand my lifestyle changes, and these promises can never bring Connor back and will never take away the pain of him not being here on earth anymore. So I make one more promise, that I'll fervently pray to God for peace and comfort for all those who are hurting. That's it.
Does that conclude your comments?
It does.
Weston apologized directly to the Lauderman family. He told them he had taken someone who was only ever good to him and that this loss would stay with him forever. He promised to live differently, remain sober, and honor Connor by making better choices for the rest of his life. After reviewing the facts, the judge noted that Weston had no criminal record, had shown genuine remorse, and did not act with intent, but also emphasized that his reckless decisions caused a devastating and permanent loss.
Just parenthetically, the discharge of a fireman in a building, typically we see that in gang type of activities where some nefarious individuals are trying to send a message to an opposing group and they fire rounds into a home. Sometimes they hit people, sometimes they don't. Obviously that's not the case here. This is far from that. So in the gang situation, there is an intent to either inflict harm or to send a message. There was no intended consequence here. Certainly there was an act, but there was no intended consequence here. Obviously the result was catastrophic. The guidelines do contemplate that you do not have a criminal history. That's your, as far as the prior record variables go, that is a 0. So those are contemplated. As far as the need for rehabilitation, there probably isn't any. I don't think you pose a risk to the public. I don't think anybody here believes that you pose a risk to the public, as eloquently stated by your attorney. So as far as we need to lock somebody up for a lengthy period of time because they pose a risk, that's not going to factor into this scenario because you do not pose a risk of harm. The guidelines do not factor into youth, and sometimes youth make unwise decisions. By the same token, the result of this is permanent and profound. It's catastrophic. I've received letters on behalf of the victim and their loved ones, and I've received letters on behalf of the defendant. All of them were very respectful to the opposing side, very, very respectful. And they were very good, I must say. And I read each and every one of them. I can assure you that I spent quite a bit of time last week going over this material. Frankly, quite a bit of time contemplating where the court was going to land, and that decision has not been made until now. So as far as the guidelines go, I don't think we need to sentence you within the guidelines. That's simply too much time based upon you did not have a nefarious intent as far as the consequence goes. There's no history, your youth, and the fact that you're not a danger to the public. So I think there's a deviation downward from the guidelines that needs to be. Where I've landed is actually a couple of grids down. So as the attorneys have indicated, I've indicated that the guidelines contemplate a sentence, and they're advisory, but they're pretty strongly advisory, of between 108 and 180 on the minimum. That's between 9 and 15 on the minimum. We're going to go below that. I think that where the attorneys originally contemplated the guidelines might land, that's probably where the sentence should land. It's not going to fix this situation because it's not fixable. It's not giving value to Connor because he was invaluable. I mean, I just can't. But what we do need to recognize is that you were intoxicated, fired off multiple rounds in a dwelling where you knew there were people, and Connor died as a result of that. So we're going to hold you accountable for that. By the same token, recognize that you do have a future, and I think where I've landed here, within the contemplated guidelines is where to go, but it's going to be at the top of the guidelines, influenced by the letters that I've received. It is the sentence of this court that you be turned over to the Michigan Department of Corrections for a minimum of 70 months, a maximum of 300 months. You have credit for 29 days previously served, must pay a restitution of $8,000, must pay state costs, crime victim costs, and DNA fees that are required by statute. This is a final sentence. You may file an application with the Court of Appeals regarding your conviction and sentence. If you're unable to hire an attorney, this court will appoint one who represents you at public expense. You need to fill out the paperwork you've been provided and return it within 42 days. That is the sentence. And for those in the gallery, the king still sits on the throne.
Your Honor, there's a request for restitution amount of $8,000 to the crime victim's compensation.
That's where we'll go. Thank you very much. We are in recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Considering all factors, the judge issued a downward departure sentence, 70 months to 25 years in state custody, along with $8,000 restitution to the family. The judge ended by saying that no sentence could undo the tragedy, but accountability was necessary, and that Weston now had the responsibility to rebuild his life while carrying the memory of Connor and the consequences of that night. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.